Our goal's pretty simple. I want to help you get what's in here and just splash it onto there. Don't worry, it's not rocket science. It's harder.
As a kid, we weren't allowed to watch TV. So the catbird seat was sort of in front of the TV, and there was a knob on top of the TV where you actually turn the channel. And so from 3 to 4, we watched General Hospital. At the end, you know, there would be this time when you knew it was time to go back to homework. And so the dial on top of the TV was basically a ticking time bomb, with every click being that much closer to having to leave watching TV. And so Bob Ross was on at 4. And so as you would turn the knob, you'd land on Bob Ross and you'd sort of be like, oh, who's this guy, you know, with the hair and whatever else. And then he would, you know, have this brush stroke of brown, and that would turn into a branch and a tree and then a forest and mountains. And so it became this sort of remarkable place where you get really quiet and your whole world would change because of him. And it would be this incredibly peaceful place. And then he would finish his painting, which you'd marvel at because you didn't see any of it coming. And then the show would end, the world would get loud, and you'd have to go back to homework. And I just always liked the idea of that person, that specific person, being seemingly the nicest person in the world. And what would it be like if that person who had this incredible power over you didn't use that power for good?
He's my biological father. No, but I do feel like in a weird way he raised me because, you know, I'm Gen X, so we're sort of like the free range children where we were just given keys around our necks. And we did not have, streaming and cable TV. So we had 3 channels. And so Bob Ross, in a weird way, did kind of raise me. Obviously, our character, Carl Nargle, is not Bob Ross. He's nothing like Bob Ross, other than he sports the Bob Rossian kind of iconic hair and the PBS station thing, which I think is sort of a wink nod from Brit McAdams, our writer-director, who was just sort of like, let's not pretend that there's now overlap with these kinds of characters. You know what I mean? It is so, like, Bob Ross is so iconic that I think he's like, let's just lean into it. But that's where their similarities end, is, you know, there is the pro.
I always really wanted it to be him to be his own person. And oddly enough, when I wrote this, Bob Ross was not part of the zeitgeist. Like, it was weird to watch Bob Ross really become that much more popular. You know, he'd been sort of a part of my childhood, but in a lot of ways he had fallen off. And then there was this resurgence of him, which, you know, in a lot of ways has created a lot of curiosity about the film. So it's been odd for me where it was sort of a personal thing that became ubiquitous. So it's been an odd evolution of that.
Well, my dad actually was the head of the PBS station in Dallas in the late 70s. So I remember visiting him at work, and there were a lot of Carl Nargle sort of lookalikes walking around at that time, or Bob Ross or Gordon Lightfoot, that kind of denim on denim look.
There's a great Gordon Lightfoot song in the film. And actually, I'll tell you, Gordon Lightfoot on Facebook is fighting for ownership of the character, which is just one of my favorite things ever. He's you know, people are like, yeah, I don't know. He's just like, take a closer look at this character because it's not based on Bob Ross. So it's like, that makes me happier than you can imagine. So it really was sort of the evolution of that as a starting point, and then just twisting it where it's, what if this guy was really sort of just trapped in the past? Like, you know, that look and everything is more about who he is as a person and sort of how the world is changing around him, and that he needs to change just, you know, to keep up.
What's the image tucked away in your brain that makes your heart ache and your soul feel like it's going to burst?
I know Willie Nelson has a song where he says, you know, you can't make a record if you don't have nothing to say. And, you know, it's the same thing, I think, in this of how do you kind of express it, and what is it that you want to express. And I think that's kind of, you know, hopefully the movie's funny, but there are some sort of poignant, kind of moving moments I felt reading the script, and hopefully those come across in the movie. Thanks for going to a special place with me, Carl Nargle.
Cut it.
That tree is probably too tall. Brace yourself, you are going to get some calls about that.